Oh, she's away, right? No, I was looking at the website, the updated CRMC website. It's so good. It's so good. They have at least 20 of the basic questions they get asked all the time. It just made me think, we really need that on our site here.
Do you want me to test it?
Yeah.
Hello? Okay. All right, everyone. It's 3 o'clock, so I think we'll call the meeting to order. Judy is not able to be here today. She's on a flight somewhere, so I'll be chairing the meeting. Claire Cummings, Vice Chair of the Coastal Resilience Committee, still getting used to our new name. And first item on the agenda is public input. Does anyone have any public input? Okay, moving on to approval of minutes from the August 6th Sea Level Rise Committee meeting. Did everyone have a chance to look that over? I know it came out a bit late. Do you have a copy? Yeah, I think there's some right there, Sosha. Yes.
Yeah. Section 3B, last sentence, she flags that Coronet continues to be the highest priority of hers. I don't know what it's supposed to mean.
Wait, sorry, say that again, Sosha.
Last sentence and 3B.
3B, sorry. Yeah, I think. Sure, asserts is fine. Okay. I'm pretty sure that's the word that. Oh, okay.
Physical should be considered next, because when we talk about cost benefit analysis, physical is at risk of becoming an island with a moat around it during flooding. And it serves almost all of the houses on the island.
Okay. Absolutely, we can include that. And did I kind of see some shaking heads that people hadn't had a chance to look at the minutes? So maybe we can make that change and put this on the agenda for our next meeting to approve. Does
Could
that
I-
sound okay? Yeah,
That's great. Could
Glenn,
I also,
do you have-
before I forget, in my update, it says that I completed a covert training, which is very exciting, but it was in fact a culvert training. No. Covert, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. Great. Okay, so we'll put that on our November to approve, so everyone has a chance to really look them over. I would now like to make a motion to switch the order of our agenda. Our guests from CRMC are gonna be catching the 5 o'clock boat, and I want to make sure we have enough time for them to do that and get a good discussion in. So can we switch 3 and 4 so that we get right to our CRMC discussion and presentations? All in favor? Okay, excellent. Well, with that done, we have here, excuse me, Emily and Anthony from the CRMC. Anthony is a permitting biologist. Emily is a coastal geologist, and I just want to say how happy we are to have you here for lending your time and your expertise to us. I think our main goal, my main goal today, is to really continue to strengthen the relationship between CRMC and the town of New Shoreham. Our committee getting some voices together to provide information about CRMC and how your work dovetails with our coastal resilience objectives. So without further ado, I think I'll turn it over to you guys and let you get started.
Excellent. Thank you for the introduction. So again, my name is Emily Hall. I am the coastal geologist on staff with the Coastal Resources Management Council. What that means is that anytime there's a project that has anything to do with sand or erosion, it generally comes across my desk at some point in that review process. I'm joined by Anthony Sawaya.
Yeah, the permitting biologist. I'm broken up into towns, but so I'm the Block Island. So any Block Island descent that doesn't involve strictly an engineer would come to me, but it's more so development and buffer zones and protecting of the wetland resources.
Our goal today is we'd really like to encourage a conversation and a dialogue. So if any members of the public or the committee have any questions, just chime in. Feel free to cut us off. We want this to be as interactive and useful as possible while we're on the island and face to face with all of you. Generally, what we wanted to provide a brief overview on was we're going to do a brief overview on what CRMC is. So what even falls into our purview, what is our mission? And then Anthony is going to walk us through the various types of permits to give you an idea of how do we get involved in the regulatory process and what does our review look like? And then I can refer us to some other educational guidances we have.
And can I just say, if that kind of follows the second from the left hand out there, so if you don't have that on the table, that might be useful as you follow along.
Excellent. So CRMC, the Coastal Resources Management Council, we are a state level agency. So we are not under DEM, as some people kind of think. We are a separate entity. Oh, there goes a chair. But we are a separate entity. Our office is in Wakefield, down in South County. But Anthony and I do try to come out to Block Island when we have permits that we need to review every few months or as needed. We have 4 general goals as an agency: preservation, protection, development, and restoration, where feasible, of the coastal areas and coastal systems of the state. These things are somewhat contradictory in nature, so it is always a balancing act. But to guide regulators, municipalities, and decision makers and property owners, we have a multitude of bureaucratic regulations. Our main one is the Coastal Resources Management Program. This is a document that is approved by NOAA at the federal level, and it is binding as state regulations. It's also referred to as the Red Book. It has an evocative red cover, if you bother to print the PDF, although it does take up a large 3-ring binder. In addition to the Red Book, we also have a series of special area management plans. Those are referred to as the SAMPs. The goal of those is basically to capture estuaries and other regions that wouldn't otherwise be captured by the Red Book, but somehow influence coastal areas. The one that is going to be of the most relevance probably to the town of New Shoreham is our Shoreline Change Special Area Management Plan, also referred to as the Beach SAMP. So I believe this was finalized somewhere around 2018 to 2019. It's a collaboration of various researchers from across the state and across state and federal regulators. And it basically is a complete guidebook on what do we do about sea level rise, erosion, and increased storms due to climate change, because all of these things impact each other and all of these things will compound each other in the coming decades. So that is a great source of information. I believe Chapter 7 is specifically dedicated to what should municipalities do. And there are a series of recommendations in there that we encourage all of our coastal municipalities to review and to see how they can adopt that. Yes.
George Davis, I'm on the on the committee as well. Anyway, Chapter 7 of the Red Book
Chapter 7 of the Beach SAMP.
of the Beach SAMP. Okay, thank you.
I have it pulled
Want
up
to
and can
clarify
send
that.
it to the committee after.
What's that?
I have it pulled up on my computer and I can send it to you guys after.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm familiar with all that. I've done that, but I didn't know what Chapter 7 was.
Excellent. So that's kind of our basic regulations. They can all be found online. But if you're curious about the specifics of what you can and can't do, it'll all be there in the text. CRMC as a whole, I know you've probably seen our name in various publications, but we do have 2 different bodies within our agency. One is the staff level and the other is the council level. Anthony and I are here as representatives of the CRMC staff. So the staff is made up of various coastal resources professionals across engineering, biology, geology, and policy. And we are providing detailed professional recommendations for all of the permits that come through our office. The vast majority of our permits are reviewed at the staff level and are approved by the director. There is a small subset of permits that, whether because they need a special exception or a variance, they get kicked up to something called the Coastal Resources Management Council. The council is an appointed body by the governor that meets every other week up in Providence, which is obviously not ideal for the community in New Shoreham, but it is always live streamed via Zoom if you would ever like to watch the council proceedings. Yes.
Who decides when those get kicked up to the council level?
So the question
Are there
is, yeah,
specific criteria or is it a judgment call? Like what, how does that happen?
it's both.
Okay, okay.
So specific criteria, there are a few like specialized criteria that no matter what, it's going to get kicked up to the council level. So those are what we call category B permits.
Right.
So fill over a certain level, I believe it's like 3,000 square cubic feet of fill. If you need an exception, a special exception. So the rule says one thing, I want to do another because I think I have a compelling case. You have to plead that case in front of the council.
Large subdivision, 6 units or more.
Yes. So there are some things that automatically need council review. The judgment call piece is when there are objections. So if there are substantive objections, and the rule on whether or not it's substantive is a decision made at the director level of the staff. So those need to have some kind of bearing in the Coastal Resource Management Program. It can't just be, I don't like my neighbor. Yes.
Great job going through this, but we really want to concentrate on what constitutes a substantive objection. Because that's a big deal.
It is. And there is specific text in the Red Book, our regulatory program.
Yeah.
I believe, do you know it off the top of your head?
What, the section or the text?
The text.
I do not know the text. I believe it's what, section 1.1.6 is those category B requirements, but substantive, again, it's up to the director, but I think it could be like loss of like, not, I don't want to say property, but loss of like use of something.
So changes to the coastal area that would be against the general classification of that coastal zone. So I've seen substantive objections get kicked up when it's something as loose, we'll say, as a change to the scenic value. So even a change in scenic value, that can be classified as a substantive
Right, and
objection.
it's
A change in
certainly-
the function of the ecosystem.
Yeah, trying to protect like the public use and like historic use of things. So when a lot of projects do go for a special exception, it has to be proven that it's going to be beneficial for the overall public and not just a private entity.
Yes.
Maybe I'm short circuiting the conversation a little bit, but if there is no, I used a term a moment ago, not substantive objection, but the,
Compelling public purpose.
well, it was something that helped establish substantive objection, but it was,
Oh, yeah, change in use or
no, it wasn't that. There was another term. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, it was because it was part of what established a substantive objection, but it was a word that gives a particular definition, like. No, that's broad. It was more like, you know, how you get standing for a substantive objection. Municipalities don't, I mean, just being a municipality doesn't give you a substantive objection.
No, and we have private, landowners and residents and even non-residents of the state that can, file a substantive.
Oh, I know what I was thinking. Who determines if it's a substantive objection?
oh, yeah, that's our director.
The executive director.
Okay.
Who is at the staff.
And if it doesn't rise to that level, then it doesn't get discussed any further. If he determines it doesn't rise to that level.
Generally, yeah, if it's not substantive, then
By the
potentially-
definition of the CRMC.
Right, and there are applications that come in with variances, but we can approve variances up to a certain level on the staff level or administrative director determines that. So if there some of those ones that might already get an objection, it probably has a variance already and that's what they're objecting to. But if it's not a substantive one, then it's just a regular variance at staff level, at the administrative level.
Okay, I know. Since I couldn't remember what the heck I was going to ask, it doesn't help much. Sorry.
Oh, fine.
I have a question on that. Thanks for asking that question. How do you decide, how does CRMC decide what projects get an on-site review after they've gone through the permitting process and they've installed their infrastructure, shall we say? How does the organization decide what projects get an actual review to see how they're doing, to see if it's failing? What do you use for criteria there?
Well, generally with any sort of restoration or buffer creation or like the non-structural stuff, we tie in monitoring stipulations. So you need a professional consultant to monitor and send a report at the end of each year. And when we have those ticked on our list, so we know that we need to be waiting for some. Sometimes we have to get on those consultants to send us in those monitoring reports, but that's how we will gauge the like process and how well it's working.
If the monitoring doesn't, it's up to the applicant to follow your instruction to self-monitor. Or you check on that, is that what you're saying?
It is stipulated, so it's up to them, they're required to. And then generally, if it's a big one that we know we haven't heard from, we're like, all right, we gotta make sure we go check on this one when we're out in that area, but it's not like it wouldn't go to enforcement unless we get a complaint about it. Enforcement would go check it out and look at the permit. So it's kind of split up a little bit between enforcement and the permit staff if we don't get that monitoring
Yeah.
And
report.
those
How do you
stipulations, oh,
Go ahead. No, no.
so those stipulations that are baked into the assent are binding. So if you violate the stipulations, the assent can be voided. So it's a requirement of, if you have this, you must send in the monitoring report. And then we have an internal tracking system that says, all right, this monitoring report is due. And again, if we don't get it, then we email the applicant, we email the contractor, and we say, you need this, otherwise, the assent could be revoked. Generally, it's not a problem, generally.
Yeah, I was just asked,
Yeah.
is it a generalization? Because it could be that an applicant's infrastructure, Sosha's word, thank you, Sosha. It might be deemed rather simple and straightforward and not be at this level of review. But in fact, it might be failing. And maybe a neighbor takes a picture to say, oh, all of these core logs are floating out to sea, for example.
Yes.
Um,
I was gonna say, it's a core log.
What, I guess to me, that's a place where a community like Block Island can be helpful.
Mhm.
How can we dovetail with you in those circumstances when the application might be considered fairly small? You use the term a big application. If it's small enough, is there an opportunity
Absolutely.
for us to work together in a way that doesn't exist right now?
It does exist, and I will tell you
does,
how it
okay.
exists. If you observe, either as a member of this committee or a private member of the community, any sort of violation, which would include non-maintenance of some kind of shoreline protection structure, or the failure of a shoreline protection structure such as core logs, you are more than welcome to report that to enforcement. That can be done by either emailing our main inbox, which is plastered all over our website, and probably in half of these handouts in front of you, or just calling our main line and saying you'd like to make a complaint to enforcement. What we need is the site, so an address if you have it. If not, saying I'm at the corner of this road and that road, and it looks like it's right over there, and a description of what's happening. If you have photos, those are always encouraged as well. Yeah. And I will also say that generally for those types of projects, the applicant doesn't want them to fail. So they tend to come in pretty quickly and say, can we get a permit to fix this, or to take it out, or to redo it entirely? So that's kind of a self-correcting system, hopefully, on that side as well.
Just gonna add the word hopefully.
Hopefully.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and when those like complaints or concerns go to enforcement, if there's an assent on that, they get the bio who worked on it and they coordinate. What did you let them do? What are the stipulations? And then we go out together sometimes and see what the issue might be and how to fix it.
You must have a tremendous staff.
Oh, yeah.
Can you keep up with it?
It's a lot. We have 2
Can
enforcement
you keep up
staff.
with it?
It's tough. We're making by, yeah.
I will always encourage that if you are worried about CRMC staff, to talk to your local representatives and to
I
encourage
understand.
more funding for the state.
Claire,
Yes.
I just want clarification. Today's purpose of the meeting is to get to know how CRMC functions. I came prepared with questions specific to Block Island. Should I just not ask them?
Oh, no, I think,
Weave them in.
yeah, absolutely. Please.
We may not have answers.
I have,
Right.
I have 5.
Okay.
Okay, can we maybe, Sosha, but maybe can we move through their presentations, and then we're definitely gonna open it up for like a broader Q&A. So maybe we can save them for
Thank
that
you.
point. Is that okay? Of course.
Okay, great.
But if there are things that you were thinking about that fit in with what Anthony and Emily are talking about right now, I think this is great that we're having a conversation, and people can feel free to, as long as that still is okay with
Absolutely.
you guys.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I do have a question. I'm Valerie. I was wondering, you were talking about the projects are approved unless, and they don't go to the council unless there's a change in public use, maybe a change in sense of place. at what point do you get the public involved? How, if you have an abutter next to you and you want to do something to your property, are they automatically notified?
Anthony, you can. take this.
Yeah, with there's those few situations that automatically need a category B. And those ones that are laid out in the red book, those ones, when we come in, we figure out, oh, this is category B, those ones directly go to public notice. for
And
a 30
public
day.
notice is available on our website. So this is something we encourage folks to look at. There's a full tab for it, I believe, of like CRMC public notice. And it's all of the applications that are required to say something weird is happening here. It's gonna need to go to council. These are those. And it lists the address, the property owner, and a description of the project.
And so if I'm a property owner and my neighbor wants to do something, I don't know, put a seawall in or whatever, I'm not going to get notified directly. It's something that I would need to be aware of by looking at the site. Is that how that works?
I believe, yeah, if it's not, so they can't put seawalls in type 1, which is like supposedly all of that, so that's good. But unless that seawall needed some type of variance, and then potentially got kicked up to the council review, I don't think it would go to public notice.
So
But yes, generally it is on the property owners if they are concerned about coastal development to be the ones to monitor that public notice page. This could also be an opportunity for groups like yourselves, right? If someone wants to monitor that and then be able to send that out to the community at large of, hey, there's 3 things that have gone up for public notice on
That's what I
CRMC's
was-
website.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a great precedent. I think there are at least one, maybe more towns where their conservation commission or some committee actually has every assent that goes through the town is part of their meeting. So that way it's like always part of public, like input. There's always space for public input on these types of things.
And I will say, anyone can file an objection for any type of application. It doesn't just have to be the ones that are automatically slated to go to council. All of our applications that get submitted are viewable on our portal, like what is called permit database, permit application database system. It's called PADS, again, on our website. And I've had folks who love to monitor that and they'll email me and say, oh, what's this project, right? And we're a public agency. All of our records are public. We will happily send you that information if we have it on file. And if there is a project that, you would want to file an objection to, you can submit those comments. So 2 places to monitor: the permit database that has everything, and then the public notice board, which has the things that are already slated to go in front of the council. Great. Yes.
So I've been in contact with Lisa Turner.
Yes.
She's the one that will provide you with the information. I've gone onto the permit database and I wanted to see the full asset for some of the work here on Block Island. She'll send it to you in a PDF file. It's great. And I said, well, can I get on the email list to be notified of everything that happens on New Shoreham? And she said, no. So, because the only things I was added to a list for things that required public notice, I suppose, but I haven't gotten anything else since in 1.5 years. So maybe I'm not anymore. So you can ask, but if it doesn't raise to the level of public hearing, you won't get notified.
Not automatically.
Not automatically.
Capabilities.
Right. Well, I tried.
Yes.
But you will get the data on the permits quite readily. Lisa will get that to you or one of her staff very quickly. Thank you.
I feel like this is already a great something to incorporate into our meetings potentially. So
Excellent. Do you want to
Yeah.
provide a brief overview of?
Yeah, just to quickly go over like the types of assents that you would need and what type of work that might be. I believe that's page 3 of that booklet is the assent checklist. This is the first sense. This is anything within 200 feet of a coastal feature. That's the CRMC jurisdiction for the Red Book. If any project touches that 200-foot jurisdiction, you need an assent from us. And included in that, you need the site plans, engineered or land surveyed, 2-scale site plans. That's a big one. it's always good to have a nice narrative to explain to us what you want to do. The proof of property ownership, the building official form is the big one. And when we get that building official form from the towns, it has checked off so it shows us that the building official is reviewing the same plans we are reviewing. Sometimes I've caught situations where it looks like a different plan was reviewed by the town versus what I'm reviewing now, and then I coordinate with the town and make sure they have those right plans, so we're all approving the same thing. So there are issues. That's the big thing to look out for with that. But when I see that building official form and it has the building official signature and the zoning official signature, that's telling me that, okay, the town is okay with this whole project. It meets all of their regulations, because we don't review those town local regulations.
Perfect spot for me to show you something.
Yes, yep,
I figure there's some reason behind that. You've probably heard of that yourself, but
right.
anyway,
Yeah.
since you were talking about it, you can explain that.
Yep.
Thanks.
And this one, it could have just been overlooked because that does happen. I believe there was an issue with I don't know if there was a zoning officer at that time, with Block Island. So I think what was happening was the building official signature was for both, but they just weren't signing on both. I'm not sure exactly. I can't speak for the town there. But in a situation like this, there are some that kind of squeak through, and we end up catching that on later. But this specific one was non-structural bluff shoreline protection. So an engineer, I believe, saw this one. I didn't see this permit.
I'm not saying.
No, I'm not saying, I don't think you're calling me out. I just want to let you know it wasn't me.
Don't want this to be a gotcha.
I'm sorry, Anthony and I have only been doing.
Well, yeah, part.
That is not the goal of this.
Oh, yeah, I'm not
No, I understand.
looking for problems. I just thought, well, maybe in some cases, because of the nature of this application, even though it had a spot, maybe it wasn't required. I don't know.
Right. I think it could have been where it was, they were signing for both and just didn't fill out both because they were maybe active, like the interim zoning board person. I'm not exactly sure.
Well,
One question.
We certainly had a zoning board official, here at that time, full time.
One question that I have, the order of things, getting sign up from local officials before they go to CRMC. So I'm a member of the planning board, and, we are not coastal geologists, we are not biologists, and having your expertise weighing in on things before approvals at the local level happen, that always seems backwards to me, to not have your review before we're approving things. Are there ways that we can involve you before we're approving better?
So
Or
it's
do you
set
not
up
have
this way.
capacity for that?
Set up this way because we have the same problem when we go to the federal. So we're on kind of in the middle of this as well. So we just stick with kind of the pyramid idea of, we know that you don't have all of the coastal expertise, but we have none of the new shore expertise. So all we are expecting from the building official sign off form is that it does not violate new shore's regulations and laws. You don't have to worry about the geological or biological impacts if that's not your expertise, because we will. And that will be encompassed at our review. Similarly, as soon as you do something in tidal waters, so that's below the high tide line or below the mean high water line, depending on the type of project, it goes up to the U.S. Corps of Engineers. And they don't give us information before we approve. We just say, all right, well, the local has said it is okay. We have said it is okay. Now here you go, federal. And then sometimes projects can stop at that stage because it violates U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Endangered Species Act, or other things like that. But generally that setup is intentional. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to add there, probably the most relevant town that does something to try to combat like our review first. Narragansett, I believe on most of their permits. So I don't have Narragansett itself, but I deal with freshwater permits that are within Narragansett. They need the town. I don't know if it's a requirement, but they are like enforcing it where they want a preliminary determination application from us saying that like we sort of approve of what you're saying, or if what you gave us wasn't good enough, you need to do these changes to submit again. So I believe the town reviews our preliminary determination and then tells the homeowner or whoever who's doing the project that, okay, you can apply. Right. So that is the,
that's really the mechanism.
that's like the only one. Those can bog down a bit if we get a lot of those, because it's us going through like all the
Sure.
regulations and figuring out what can and can't be done. But especially if it's like a town project, like that's a good option
Okay.
to go through.
That's great. Thank you.
And a preliminary determination, for those that are unfamiliar, is essentially a staff level finding of fact. So someone gives us the rough draft and we say, all right, here's all the regulations we think are going to apply. Here's the speed bumps you're definitely going to encounter if you go forward with this. Consider all of this information before you submit the final draft, the real plans and the real assent. And you can apply for that for anything if you want. Generally, we see them for things that are going to require some finagling of the rules or some figuring out variances and things like that. But if everything complies with regulations, we tend not to see PDs just because it's more paperwork, more time, et cetera.
Let's say like an assent application came across, like maybe a committee or council's debt group, or like maybe planning board or zoning board, and they were, either at still not as like confused and wanted more expertise. Do you think that's a sort of space where they could say, we actually would like you to get a PD before we make a decision? Is that in the?
I think that is a good stance to have. It's not like we don't require it, or
Yeah,
the town
like,
could require
That might be
it,
a moment to ask for it.
Yeah.
That would be on the town,
On the
and that would be up to the building official, zoning official, however you all are set up as a municipality. That would be within your asks, presumably. I don't know how all the ordinances down here work.
Right. The other option is getting a like consultant, wetland consultant, natural resources consultant, and getting their input. But some of them aren't don't always have everything very control either.
And a lot of them work across states, right? And state regulations are obviously different. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Has anyone lost us on the types of applications? If type A, which is your normal assent, versus category B, which automatically get picked up to the council. Okay, the one other one that I do want to mention, because it comes up a lot with core logs and non-structural shoreline protection, are maintenance certifications. So maintenance certifications can be applied for if there is less than 50% damage to the structure. So basically, if there are minor damages and they say, we don't need to change anything structurally, we just need to put back what there was, they can apply for a maintenance certification. In that case, since nothing's really different, you're just, patching some holes, right? It doesn't need a building official sign off because nothing's changing. You're just putting back what was there, and we assume it was already authorized. We're good to go. And those are only for in-kind replacements. You can't do expansion of the footprints, give or take a few inches on either side, because we know you can't always be exact. But maintenance certifications can apply if there's less than 50% damage. As soon as it's more than 50% damage, we say, sorry, this classifies as new work. You need a new assent. And at that point, for the new assent, all of our regulations apply. So anything that was grandfathered into the program, if that has more than 50% damage, they can't claim a grandfather if the structure is destroyed. So that's kind of our primary mechanism when people say, why does CRMC let people like build houses on the dunes? We don't if it gets destroyed, right? And so this is something we've seen a lot along the South Shore in the communities of like Green Hill and Charlestown, especially after Superstorm Sandy. We had houses that got wiped out and they had to push everything to the far back if they could. And some, they couldn't meet those regulations anymore, so they had to convert to parking lots and things like that instead. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and another quick one with maintenance stuff. We do give maintenances if it's, again, destroyed less than 50% for structures that were predating the regulations. That is
Yes.
grandfathered in. So even if, because maintenances are for prior assents and things that predate the regulations.
Only if less than 50%. Thank you for the
Yes.
clarification. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, let's see, what else did I want to mention? I guess I'll go into the coastal hazard analysis worksheet. It's page 9 of that packet when he had printed out for us. And this is another thing that's required in applications when you are, tells you right on there with, mainly with development, if you're new houses, new structures, any expansion of existing structures of greater than 600 square feet, adding a second story. And it's just to have the sign off from, and it's go on the Storm Tools on our website. There's everything there. It tells you how to go through it all and check off all these boxes and to make sure you are aware of the potential sea level rise when like if you put this structure in, sea level rise is going to affect this. If it's going to affect it in 10 years, you could bump it up to 10 years or like 10 feet of sea level rise and see where you might be if that situation happens.
Can I just, does that include storm surge?
Yes, there are tabs you can put on for with like
Okay.
100-year storms.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
So, if I may interject briefly, Storm Tools and this coastal hazard analysis worksheet are two of the main products that came out of that beach SAMP that I was discussing earlier. So the Federal Emergency Management Association, FEMA, they already have some existing flooding maps and predictions for what will happen under sea level rise and storms. But Storm Tools is focused just on Rhode Island. And it says what's going to happen if we have sea level rise, storms at the same time, and we know that storms cause things like dunes to wash away. So what is that actually going to look like at a finite spatial scale in our state? So it is what I think is one of the best geospatial tools available. So it incorporates realistic storm surge for various types of storms. And then you can scale the type of storm to the amount of sea level rise to try to get an idea of really the idea of this is what's your house going to look like at the end of your 30-year mortgage is what we're trying to communicate to people.
And I believe too, if I could be wrong, but I believe this coastal hazard analysis worksheet, it's more so of like a recommendation of us saying like, because it has the erosion rates and everything like that. And if you don't meet the erosion rates, you could still get what you're applying for, because this isn't like binding saying if you can't meet these requirements, you can't build. It's just saying if you do this, this will probably happen. And we're sort of putting them on notice, saying like, we told you this could happen, but here you go if you really want it, sort of thing.
Informed consent, if you will.
Is that policy partly in place because you as well as municipalities don't want to get sued by people who say, I bought this, it was a building lot at the time?
Our legal staff is always advising us that we want to avoid a takings case, and we will leave it at that. And we are getting sued a lot of ways right now as an agency, so. So Storm Tools, I would say, is kind of our main resource, along with the beach SAMP and the CHA, that coastal hazards analysis that we tend to refer to folks. But I think that's kind of most of what we have to chat about. Go ahead.
Thank you, sorry.
Yeah.
Just going off of this again, this is something we've talked about. Sosha, I think you've kind of championed something like this on all applications that come before our local planning and zoning boards. Do you know of any municipalities? Because I'm just thinking right now, like, so you guys only use this for projects within 200 feet of a coastal feature, but there are certainly low-lying places that are much further than that
Yes.
from a coastal feature that would benefit from seeing something like this before development happens. So do you have municipalities that you know of who require something like this as part of their permitting? or part
I
of their-
don't believe so.
No,
At least not the ones that I've worked. with.
okay.
I don't believe so either.
Okay.
Standard building codes need to account for, I believe they just upped it to a 500-year flood instead of a 100-year flood is the recommendation. Don't know if it's a requirement at all levels yet. But that would generally happen at the building code level for general flooding. I will say on our end, we have just received a grant in collaboration with the University of Rhode Island to expand Storm Tools to inland flooding. because we do know
Good.
that
Oh,
it's
wow.
not
That's
just
good.
coastal flooding.
Right.
So that is in its second year. It's being done by Reza Hashemi of the University of Rhode Island Ocean Engineering Program.
Cool.
And he has several public outreach events kind of scheduled with updates. I believe it's a 5-year project timeline, but it's already funded. It's in the works. When we get it out, everyone will know. Because we will be pushing that. But I do not know if any municipalities that require it.
Okay. Did you have more as part of your presentation?
No, I think, just go back and forth with questions. I do want to
Yeah.
add
And I know plenty.
so the CRMC also does, we have our freshwater wetlands too. We call it freshwater wetlands within the vicinity of the coast. It's the same regulations as DEM's freshwater wetlands. Some of the language has changed for coastal things, but if you go on the Rhode Island DEM website and look up their environmental resource map, you can interactive map. You can look at history of aerial photos. There's a boundary map which shows the wetland jurisdiction. I think green is DEM and blue is CRMC. A lot of it is like on roads is like where the jurisdictional line changes. So that's why I deal with freshwater wetland applications because it's still within the CRMC jurisdiction. Break it up from the DEM because they're still pretty close in like that coastal area.
The goal of that dividing line is that someone doesn't have to get a wetland application from CRMC and DEM. We just tell them which agency to send the paperwork to.
Yes,
Got it.
yeah, we have applications that have both of the regulations overlapping, and we review both those sets, the Red Book and the freshwater, but whichever application is more restrictive in what it will let you do, I want you to apply with that. So if the freshwater wetland buffer is bigger and it takes up more, you want you to apply for a freshwater wetland application and include all the Red Book like regulations in it too, like inside the narrative, and say we addressed this, but it's a freshwater app because there's more freshwater that we had to address.
Thank you. Glennie.
Okay.
Turn it over to you.
Perfect. Yeah, before we get underway in our discussion, I just wanted to talk a little bit more specifically about, I know obviously we're all here as the perspective from the municipality of town of New Shoreham, trying to figure out how we operate with CRMC. So just thinking about, in that great overview that you got from Anthony, that one bullet point of what does, compliance with state level regulations, building officials, zoning officials sign off. Like that's really, you can think of that as like the wedge of where the town of New Shoreham comes into play in this assent process. And I'm really hoping that we can have a discussion about how we can be as proactive and active in that assent process so that it gets to the point where we can, be part of these decisions as they happen rather than thinking about having to use the objections as a mechanism for public input. So to that note, it was already highlighted, but part of every assent that goes through CRMC, it's on page 7, this building official and zoning official sign off form. So that's kind of at a bare minimum that's being checked. That's where we have the opportunity to check that the permit, that any local building permits that are needed, either it doesn't need it or it does need it, and those have already been like accomplished, have already been approved. If it needs any septic suitability determination, and then really whether it conforms with elements of the zoning ordinance, and if it needs zoning board of approval, that it has already gone through that process. And so I think like that is kind of the bare bones. There's also been other towns in Rhode Island that use this as an opportunity for more public engagement and public input. I think I mentioned earlier that certain conservation commissions, often all the CRMC assent permits that come through their town go to their go through their meeting. So there's that opportunity for public engagement and public input kind of baked in there. I know that earlier we talked about how it's hard if you're just a person trying to check the portal to stay on top of what's coming through. But the nice thing about this assent is that, they are coming through the town of New Shoreham, and, this can be a place where we have the right like protocol in place. It can really hit some like nice points depending on what the goal is for these assents. I also want to reference that in our town ordinances, there is actually a component where any applications that go through CRMC would be forwarded to the Conservation Commission and in terms of for them to transmit recommendations to the town council. And that also there's some mechanisms in there for the zoning board to also similarly like speak on these assents. I don't know how frequently they're enacted or how actively they're used, but there is kind of precedence in our town ordinances for that.
Glennie, can you say that again? They're already, no, just the part about, is it already in the town ordinances that it's supposed to go through the Conservation Commission?
So it is already in the town ordinances that that applications that go through CRMC are supplied to the Conservation Commission, and then they can make a decision or not whether they would like to, I believe, whether they can transmit its recommendations in the matter to the town council. That is currently what our ordinances say.
And I wonder if there's anybody in the audience that could tell me if that actually happens?
That is my understanding too, that it doesn't. Who is we?
Commission?
Sorry, Amanda, do you mind coming up? Sorry, sorry. And sorry to put you on the spot, like.
That's okay. I'm Amanda. I clerk the Conservation Commission. We do not always receive notifications. Like there are some projects that do receive notifications and do come across our desk, but not a lot.
Okay, and is that something that,
I just started watching the CRMC meetings to be able to see if stuff is coming, but I don't get.
how would they come across the Conservation Commission? Is that on our town to be looking at your website and monitoring that and putting them on agendas, applications before they go for review? How does that work?
That would be one mechanism. I don't know of any town that has something like that where we notify them. So what I would recommend is talking with your building official. I don't know if they're present in the room, and saying, when you get this form, because they have to sign it, right? Can you send it to us as well?
Got it.
So catch it before it even gets there.
I see.
I think I did
So
work
it's
for
an
the
in-
town in the
Okay.
land use for a couple years before Amanda, and there were a bunch of them flagged that from the CRMC, like a couple downtown developments that were within the coastal zone.
And when you say flag, do you mean what
We
then
got the
happened?
packet was brought to Conservation
see.
Commission to go over because the CRMC paper was in the folder.
I see. Thank you, Corey.
Well, zoning or planning would give them to, we would give them to the Conservation Commission to review. They reviewed the landscape design, the setbacks. I mean, Ned did a lot of that and anything.
So that's my question. That was coming from planning and zoning.
Yes.
Not from the building official.
No, it comes, if there was a CRMC form in there, it was flagged to go to Conservation Commission.
But that was part of the applicant's packet.
Yes.
So no, Renee, it's not coming from planning and zoning and going to Conservation Commission. It comes in as part of the applicant's application. They then flag it as, the building official then sends that to, they're the ones who are seeing this information and dispersing it. Yeah, the building department.
Do I have that right?
I mean, it's a little of both, but I mean, the building official's not giving it to the Conservation Commission.
It's coming from.
There are, Keith Stover, Beacon Hill Road. There are, if I recall correctly, required the form that I'm aware of, and I was only made aware of it when we met with CRMC a few months ago, has a signature line for the zoning official and a signature line for the building official. And I know there was one in particular, and this is by no means, this is not a criticism of anybody, where I believe only one of them signed. And I mean, like that stuff happens. But if I could, it would be really, really helpful to, obviously, I have a lot of learning around what our existing ordinances say, but equally, Glennie, you referenced some towns that have a very clear mechanism to solicit public input. And I'd love to see those just as a member of the town council, because I think as a policy matter, as we're undoubtedly going to see accelerating, for lack of a better description, private resiliency projects, I think we're going to want to have, first and foremost, a handle on what applications there are. And then a second part of that is what would our policy response be? But if we don't see them, thank you.
Can I just say, I will very happily share all the Conservation Commission information. It's actually really awesome. Some of them have great websites where they even do site visits and then type up their little reports on their site visit and everything. And it's super publicly available. So I'm excited to share that.
Yeah, I'm seeing if they're open to it, Amanda, maybe a nice joint meeting between some members of our committee to share the information we're learning here with some members of the Conservation Commission, because I know there's been a lot of turnover. There's just seems like there's some great opportunity for both of us to grow together. Yeah.
I can definitely work on that. We are just now at a full board for the first time, which since I've been here, which is exciting. So definitely changes in the works, but definitely something we can plan on.
I think it could be cool because a lot of the structure is on the conservation side, but it seems like there's some more capacity on the Coastal Resilience Committee, so it could be a good partnership.
Glennie, were there any other things you wanted to bring up as part of your presentation?
I think I hit my main points, yeah.
Great, thank you. So I've loved that this has been a great discussion throughout. When I was thinking about all this, to me, it seemed like there were a lot of questions that I saw about permitting process, the relationship between the town and CRMC, which we've been covering up until this point. And if there are any more questions relating to that, I'd love to get to those. And then I also received a number of questions and have questions of my own about more specific potential projects on the island, which if we have the time, maybe we can start just entertaining those. Sosha, I know you said you had prepared a number of questions. Do you have any more that are pertaining to more the like governance, permitting, that kind of thing?
No.
Anyone else with questions about that kind of those sorts of topics?
No, I just do want to make
Yeah.
a comment for CRMC that just congratulations on your website where you list so many questions that in your facts question pages, they're very good.
I think that is the first compliment I've received on our website. We are a state agency, so we just put all the information there.
Her name is Mary.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. So should you want to kick us off, or I have some
Sure.
questions from Nigel?
Since I had 5 questions, I'll do the 3 most important ones.
Excellent.
And
Great.
give other people turn.
And we'll try to keep our answers quick so we can. get
All
everyone
right.
done.
Now, I'm not good at communicating, so be patient, please. It is my understanding that the use of coir logs was never intended for bluffs. They were intended for low-lying wetlands. And one of the drawbacks of using them on bluffs is that it could result in erosion to neighboring properties. And that would be my major concern. And the second main concern is when they install these logs, they have to dig the dunes out first before they install the logs. So when the logs die, which can happen within 3 years or a very serious storm, the dunes are left, or the bluffs are left, even more damaged than before the project had begun. So my question to you is, why does CRMC approve the use of coir logs on bluffs and dunes?
This is my favorite question. And I'm happy to tackle it. I will first cash this though, that as coastal geologist, I've only been with the agency since the summer of 2023. Core log projects that happened before that, there was an interim period without a geologist to review them. So I cannot speak to the review process on some of those. So I'll start first by discussing, what is the intended use of core logs? So for those that are not familiar, core logs are made of coconut fiber. Generally, they are coconut fiber mats that get coiled into something that looks like a log. They can be anywhere from 6 to 18 inches in diameter, and they can be as long as this table that we're currently sitting at. There are also things called core envelopes, which are much wider in diameter. Those can generally be 2 to 3 feet in diameter. And they are essentially burritos of sand. So mega sandbags made out of biodegradable coconut fiber material. I believe core logs are more popular in usage in general in bluff systems. I have seen core logs act successfully when they are used to stabilize newly planted vegetation and highly organic soils. So what that looks like is salt marshes, for example. So scarps, and that is where the majority of research has been done on core logs. Core logs are currently permitted as a form of what we call non-structural shoreline protection. Non-structural shoreline protection is the only type of shoreline protection you can do on type 1 conservation area waters, which is basically all of Block Island. The intent of non-structural shoreline protection is that materials must be either biodegradable or naturally found in the habitat. So that can look like dune plantings, that can look like bringing in sand to artificially replace a dune, that can look like beach nourishment. And for those who have gotten creative with our regulations, they have realized core logs are also technically a part of non-structural shoreline protection. So they are currently permitted because our contractors got creative and decided to start using them. And we have not seen convincing evidence that they are actively harming the system yet. As far as your question on differential erosion, I will say that for every core log permit that I have signed off on thus far, there's a stipulation there that should this experimental erosion protection fail or cause erosion to neighboring systems, the experimental erosion protection system must be removed.
And will the dune or bluff then also be replenished? Because they cut into those.
So I'll get to that next.
Okay, all right.
Right. So non-structural shoreline protection, the whole idea is we want it to mimic the natural system, right? So we can't stop erosion. We certainly cannot reverse it. When it comes to dealing with an erosion, it is a matter of mitigation. It is a matter of managing expectations and potentially buying time to come up with other solutions. So if we're increasing erosion where that's not, well, that's not the intended function of non-structural shoreline protection anymore. As far as the destruction of coastal features, again, I can say I have not permitted that. Under type 1 regulations, you can restore a feature. So ideally there shouldn't be any full excavation of the feature and then implantation of core logs and then a full restoration of the feature. Something that does happen is anchoring of core logs. I would rather see, and the program has this as well, I'd rather see core logs installed correctly than thrown down and not anchored correctly, and they can just be adrift. There are 2 main ways of anchoring core logs. One is wooden stakes going straight through. The more effective way to anchor them in unconsolidated soil, so think sand, is what we call duckbill anchors. And those you do have to basically drill into the bluff.
And is that required now?
It is not required. It is a form of anchoring that we can technically permit. And the staff that reviews that, so it's generally me as the geologist and then a member of the engineering team, I'll get their input, will say, is this going to function the way that it's intended? And are there going to be adverse impacts to the environment if they do it this way? So that's kind of our reviewing mechanisms for those. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
sort of. Um, Other than the use of sand fencing and the planting of dune grasses, in your opinion, what is the best way to replenish dunes? In our case, I'm talking about the dunes along Corneck Road. We want those dunes to function as a buffer during storm surges. However, we have quite a few paths going right through those dunes. Of course, a huge opening at the beach pavilion. So part of that question is, would the dunes function better if these openings were closed off? Yeah,
Short answer.
so other than,
Yes.
yes,
However, CRMC, one of their main goals is to preserve public access. So we want to make sure that there is some sort of public access to the beach.
we were thinking of, and I don't know what the name of it is, but it's essentially slats going over the dune so that in case we need emergency vehicles as well as people to cross the dunes, they can without destroying the dunes.
So there are two things that I've seen similar to that. One is our walkover structure program. So walkover structures are the only thing you can build on a coastal dune per our regulations. So those are stairs up, platform over, stairs down. Those are generally capped at 4 feet in width, so probably not suitable for emergency vehicles. I've also seen Moby mats employed, so that's actually a brand.
That's the word.
Okay, excellent. So the town of Narragansett has had a lot of success deploying those. Think one continuous roll up of a yoga mat that you could basically roll out up and over the dune. And it also provides mobility assistance and ADA accessibility for wheelchair users. I will also say though, that if you do want to keep your traditional cut through of the dune, in some mid-Atlantic states, they've had success doing a zigzag cut through.
Okay. we
So
talked
rather
about-
than going straight perpendicular, you cut in at 45 and then you cut out 5-degree angles. So if you want to go on Google Earth and scroll through Ocean City, Maryland, you're going to see them all through that barrier system there. The idea with that is that you are mitigating any erosion from
Right.
waves
You're
coming
right.
up and getting channeled straight through.
So
Dunes are built by the wind and eroded by the waves.
one way, so that is part of the same question. There are two ways that I know of that we can replenish the dunes. Either the wind will blow the sand on the beach onto the dune, 3 ways, or we dredge sand that's compatible and dump it on the dunes or dump it on the beach. And there's a third way that is called a sand engine, where the dredged sand is deposited strategically in a spot where the ocean current will then deposit it on the beach naturally. From your perspective, which method is most effective?
Depends on what your goal is, how much money you have, and what your time frame is. I think all of them have the feasibility to be effective. You know, from a complete non-interventionist standpoint, the most effective would be to let the dune recover where the dune wants to be. So frequently that looks like inland migration of the dune. But we often have infrastructure, we often have roads or buildings.
We don't have inland.
Okay, yeah, you don't have inland left, right? So under a sea level rise scenario, again, the dunes, they don't want to be in the water. They don't want to be hit by the waves. So if your water keeps on rising in a natural system, the dune would progressively move inland.
Right.
If you can't have that, we get what we call coastal squeeze. So there's nowhere for it to move inland and you keep on losing dune. And then that's when you get to how do you augment that? How do you make up for the sediment supply? The most popular thing in the state is to just truck in sand and dump it. Another popular thing to do is when you have overwash deposits. So the waves take some of the sand, they dump it on the road. Your DPW, they come through, they plow the sand, they can put that
Put
right
it
back on the
back.
front, right? So you're kind of just restarting that process. Again, you're buying yourself time. As far as the sand engine route, I believe the Army Corps already does a small version of that with the dredging that happens here for the federal channel. They deposit it kind of strategically so that hopefully some of that sand rejoins the beach.
Okay, I will defer to other people who have questions before I
Excellent
continue.
questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I get to do my little geology lecture.
Anyone else with questions of this nature for Emily and Anthony? Yes, absolutely.
It just occurred to me when you were talking about the core logs, I just had a quick question about your process. I wonder, do you require or review the impact of the installation of, say, a resiliency project on abutting property owners? That's always sort of one of my concerns when I see those is, well, ooh, good for you. But is it good for the entire sort of, whatever, the entire bluff or the entire dune system or whatever? Wonder how that
Absolutely.
works.
I can speak to my personal review process when it comes to that. One of the stipulations I include is that the return of the structure must be within the property boundaries and gradually rejoin the existing coastal feature. So that way you don't have a Tetris wall effect. You have curves, right? And the hope is that you have curves, you don't have spots where the water can get in and eat away behind the structure. So that's one mechanism, and it's stipulated for that. And I make sure that I get plans that show a system that physically looks like that. As far as review goes, I tend to pull some modeling data, see what are the major longshore currents in the area. So where is the sand coming from and where is it going? So if this is a source of sediment, if we stop sediment from leaving here, then what are the negative downshore impacts going to be? So that's my main review process, is saying, where is it situated in the longshore system? If it's at the end, well, they're not going to have many downstream impacts, that kind of thing.
I have another core log question.
So I brought you.
No, seriously.
This is good. Core logs are they're a new technology,
Yeah.
right? So the more information we can get out to the more people, the better.
Well,
Yeah.
to that point, that they're a relatively new technology, you said you hadn't seen evidence of them causing damage to bluffs when they're used in stabilization projects. Are there other places besides Block Island where they've been used in this manner? That you
In
know of
bluffs?
that are being monitored currently? Or are we?
I don't know of bluffs, so
Okay.
I will start with that. But they are increasingly being used as what we call an engineered core, CORE, of a dune. And that is happening in both
Okay.
Jerusalem
not
as well as
external, they're-
westerly. Exactly. There are a few external that are effectively functioning as pseudo seawalls because of some historic designations for that area. But otherwise, they're being used as internal
Okay.
components of a dune. And I've yet to see data that shows that that's any better than just using sand. But I think it makes property owners feel better. The core log, in a best case scenario, it's going to hold up for 3 to 5 years. That's the specs I get from the people who design the things, right? I do trust that spec. And if in a dune, for example, you had a storm event that eroded the seaward side of the dune within that 3 to 5 years, maybe you buy yourself some extra time, right? It stops the erosion right there. You don't lose more dune. But that's a numbers game. I heard from a realtor that if you want to live on the coast, you need a strong stomach and deep pockets. And that is, when it comes to core logs and things like that, that tends to be kind of my message to folks.
However,
Yes.
during a storm, if the core logs function well, they essentially become a hard structure, increasing the erosion on both ends.
So that's,
Or if I
Sorry.
could just add,
Go
that,
for it.
Tricia, they can also, the underground streams on the land side, not the ocean side of that installation, after quite a bit of rain, can also help to erode that bluff before you see it eroding, and you can see that erosion also right on the edge of an installation that borders the next property, for example, that does not have an installation.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
core logs. Sorry, I got.
No, you're good, you're good. Sorry, I was just like formulating my answer here. So as far as erosion goes in a storm, we'll start there. The idea with core logs is that the weft is of the fiber itself is wide enough that you have some infiltration. And that it does not function exactly as the seawall does. Is it as dissipating as the natural system would be? No, but I don't think it's entirely fair to say either that it is as bad
Okay.
as stone from what I have seen. I do think it is some sort of middle ground here. And we do stipulate that they get planted with vegetation. And then as soon as you have those plant roots in there as well, that helps break up that weft more. And I think there is some dissipative action that occurs there.
Sure.
Sorry, just, I feel like this discussion of bluff stabilization, forgive me for being kind of naive about this, but is there anywhere else in Rhode Island that has bluffs like Block Islands?
Not like Block Island, but there are coastal bluffs and headlands.
Okay.
So if you think of the South Shore, it was originally a series of barrier islands, and those are all sandy, basically vegetated sandbars that are now above the high tide line. And then in between, and then there's salt ponds behind those. But in between those salt ponds, those are technically headlands. So Matunic has a headland at the South Kingstown Town Beach.
Okay.
It's just not nearly as vertical as Block Islands, but that one is maybe 5 to 6 feet.
I guess I'm asking that question because I'm feeling like we all in this community are having a lot of questions about our bluffs and the stabilization of them and how projects are permitted on them with CRMC locally. And I know you guys need to catch a ferry in 45 minutes. And I don't know that we're gonna get to, I think this is a worthy conversation to continue to have with you specifically or someone else from CRMC about how these projects are being considered. Nigel had some great questions about, you know, do you consider the loss of future sediment? If bluff erosion is an important source of sediment for beach and dune maintenance and restoration, is the loss of that future sediment, if a request is granted, something you seriously consider when debating a request? You know, there,
Yes,
there
and
are a
I
lot
can
of-
do a
okay.
quick answer on that.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I meant it more as
Alright,
like an
sorry.
example. I mean, I would love to get an answer on that for Nigel, but I just think there are a lot of questions about these projects that are unique to Block Island and.
So to
that
keep it
might-
short, then I will simply refer to the Red Book. So we have a section that is entirely for coastal headlands and bluffs. So I believe it's 1.2.2 D.
Wow.
Control F for coastal bluff in the PDF document. And there is going to be a series of policies, regulations, and prohibitions. It's maybe only about 3 to 4 pages. It is written in plain text, so that folks can understand it and do the proper regulations. But one of those regulations is that you can't harden a bluff because you would lose sediment supply to the neighboring regions. So that is
And I guess
considered.
we're
in review.
seeing that potentially of these core lots is that we're-
That's the question. And as I am getting more applications in, like we did a site visit recently where they applied for a maintenance. We went out, we said, this is way more than 50% damage. We need a full new ascent. So that's an active evaluation that's happening. I think the issue is exacerbated on Block because along the South Shore, all of those headland bluffs and they have dunes in front of them, and you don't have that here, right? It's just the headland. You don't have another layer of protection. So, but for
Sorry, a little, I think it's off topic, but the decision with Quinnesset Country Club, will that change all of this?
the decision is pending.
You guys denied it at staff level.
Staff wrote a recommendation to deny the petition for a water type change,
To
type
type
1
1
to
to
type
type
2. The staff report is public, and I would encourage a review. The council they have not voted to allow the water type change. They have simply voted to allow public comment of the applicant, in this case, Quinnesset Country Club, to plead their case one final time before the Planning and Procedures Subcommittee. I will also note that while that petition for the water type change is ongoing. There is simultaneous enforcement action happening as well, and that is proceeding as normal enforcement would, independent of the
But
water
if
type
it's
change.
allowed to stay and set a precedent,
Even if the water type change is approved, it would still not be in compliance with type 2 waters, so they would still need to take it out,
okay.
which I don't think has been made clear. There was something that would have to change.
Okay, sorry, I was
Um,
off topic.
Yeah, that's okay. And if that were to happen, I would worry about the precedent, and I would leave it at that.
Thank you.
I have a really quick question before you go. And I'm leaning this way. If, one of the things with science always is you have to have enough data to back up what's going forward. Are there studies, are people going out and checking the core logs? Would it be helpful for public to be sending you pictures if there's any issues that we're seeing? Is it something that you're already doing? Is it something the town maybe can do to look at the projects that are here?
I will say it's a pet project of mine. And that I am actively collaborating with scientists at University of Rhode Island, as well as the Coast Guard Academy, who specialize in this. So if someone's taking notes, I'm going to throw out a couple of things. Dr. Brian Maggi is a coastal engineer at the Coast Guard Academy who researches these, as well as other geosynthetic containers. Dr. Christopher Baxter, who you may be familiar with because he's been involved in the offshore wind. He is in this space as well, and you can ping him, as well as who's the guy at East Carolina University? Dr. Brian Oakley at East Carolina. Okay, everyone knows Brian. Great.
That's a very familiar name here.
Excellent. So those would be the scientists I would ping, but it is an active area of interest for staff members as well. If you would like to email me, feel free to send me some photos. I've got a drive on my personal files that I just save these in and I take some notes in. But I will never say no to more information. How's that?
May I ask you a quick question also?
What's that? I'm sorry.
May I ask you a quick
Oh, yes,
question also?
please, go ahead.
And this discussion of core logs, I can't help but think of a project that's just north of the Southeast Light. It's a private project and it was designed by an engineer on a bluff that's a good 60 feet or so, if that's a guess. And in the application, in the process of building this or reconstructing the bluff in front of their house where they were losing quite a bit of land, getting closer and closer to their house, it's tiered now with the core logs. So that first tier of core logs is sort of embedded into that end of the first tier where it hits the next level, and it tiers, I think, for 3 levels. Each level is maybe, I think you walked that with me, maybe 8 feet deep. And it is planted with vegetation and more burlap as well, holding up that. Just quickly, is that just another buying of time? Because not only is that bluff, in this case, getting a lot of inundation from the sea, it almost is in that area of the photo of the painting on the wall. So it's getting all of that inundation and force of the ocean currents and ocean energy on the bluff. But it's also, there are quite a few, I think there's 3 in this site, which is probably a quarter of a football field long. It gets very wet. There's 3 underground streams. So it's already starting to give out. It's probably was installed 3 years ago. Is that just another really buying of time, an experiment in a sense?
In my personal opinion, yes. I will say that CRMC prohibits the regaining of land that is lost via natural erosion, via filling. So you can't say, I've lost this via erosion, let me fill everything back out to where it was. And that when we do that non-structural shoreline protection applications in, we require on the plans the current toe of the feature. And then you need to grade inland from there. And I believe our maximum grade is a 2 to 1 for horizontal to vertical. So if we follow those simple prohibitions, you lose erosion, your toe is now inland, so you need to grade farther inland.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Thanks, Mary. Any further
questions from folks for Emily?
If anyone has a wetland question for
Yeah,
Anne.
right?
This is
Is there time for it?
often issue.
Yeah, I
We have
think
a little
so.
bit, yeah, we have a little time.
All right, here we go.
Just if you
So-
miss our ferry, you owe us dinner. That's
And a place to stay.
It's because I don't speak well extemporaneously. I need to write things down. And I'm bilingual, so that just screws it up even more. So anyway, I was very excited at one point at one of our meetings that the wind turbines have been acting as an artificial reef and have created new ecosystems. The fish at first were scared off and they've all come back. But my question for you is slightly related to that. I understand that you don't like any mitigation strategies that destroy a given ecosystem. But what if the given ecosystem is going to be replaced by an equally desirable ecosystem? Would you permit that?
Yes. And of course, that's with an asterisk, right? That yes. That value determination is going to be different person to person, right? And community to community. So what's good for the fisher folks may not be good for recreationists.
Okay.
But we have seen some projects where if they're serving like similar ecosystem functions, you know, if this was a salt marsh, but it got eroded into a mud flat, we want to replant it as a salt marsh, like that type of thing. I've seen that occur, right? And also even on a dune ecosystem, when we have overwash, that does create new habitat. Piping plovers love it, right? But it's not providing the same coastal buffer system. So we still allow people to put dune back in, even though it was flattened. So it's not an automatic no. When it comes to artificial reefs, I have yet to see permits come through our state for that. It is a very popular mitigation strategy as you get into the mid-Atlantic and the southeastern US. And we have some regulations that say living shorelines are permitted, and they don't count as under the prohibition for filling of tidal waters by our standards. So we are open to the applications, but I will warn you, as soon as it's underwater, you have to go through federal. So that is US Army Corps of Engineers, and then they then refer it to all of the other federal agencies. So if it's in navigable waters, it needs to get approval from the US Coast Guard and also the National Marine Fisheries Board, or it's a NOAA office. So that's it. The
Good to
federal
know.
level.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, in the interest of, Valerie, were you about to?
One wetland.
Okay.
All right.
Absolutely.
Then we're gonna let these guys go so they can make their vote.
When there's a structure within 150 feet of a wetland on the island, it's still 200 feet in. If you got anything within the 200 feet.
From a coastal feature, yeah.
From the coastal feature, but a rivulet into the stream is that coastal lake. So if we have a output of fresh water, where does the coastal end with that?
Right, it depends. The fresh water will have to flow sort of directly into the coast if we want to continue that contiguous line up to call that still a coastal wetland. It's a contiguous freshwater wetland, which we then call coastal wetland. So the water kind of has to be connected to the tide some way, and salt vegetation has to sort of be blur that line. But if say there's a stream that just drops off a bluff, then we separate that. That stream could then be considered a tributary to like type 1 waters of the coastal feature. But we would separate it along those breaks, and then we'd say the stream is the fresh water, and then the coastal's here, and we break up the setbacks and buffers then. But also if it's still that fresh water, if it's still a contiguous freshwater wetland flowing into coastal waters, we would take the bigger buffer. If it's still a freshwater stream, if it's got a larger buffer than what coastal regs would allow, then we would use both regs as the larger buffer. All right.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having
Thank
us.
you guys so much for
We have
coming.
more answers been questions. I fear I've made things worse. Okay. Glennie, I think you've been taking minutes. If there's anything that we've referenced that you need a link for or need some more information, you have my email. I'm also gonna leave a few of my cards here, with my email as well as the main office phone. Feel free to reach out. I'm not always the
Thank
best
you.
at getting back to you, so
Yep.
bother me again.
I have some cards. I forgot to print out more, get more, but my info's
Thank you both so much. We
Absolutely.
really, this was very informative. As I said at the beginning, certainly my hope is that this is, another step in the direction of, building a real dialogue between our community and the CRMC and,
Yes.
continuing to strengthen that partnership. So thank you. Would like to run?
all right.
Thank you for having us
Thank you.
again. Thank you. Card.
Great, thank you. So I think we'll now move back up to number 3. Committee member updates. So update on town council. I did not have anything from Judy on that. Does anyone else have something on that item? Okay. Update from town planner. Allison, I see you're on. Do you have anything you would like to add to our discussion here?
I will just mention the hazard mitigation plan update. Glennie, Judy, and I are participating in the advisory committee for that with the town's consultant, Kim Jacobs. So there's going to be a meeting, a public information meeting in October, I believe it's October 10th, with this committee. So information will be going out about that. It'll start with it's in the evening and we'll start at Cornneck Road, I believe. That was the plan. So that should be a good meeting to kick off that public process of updating the plan public survey. I believe it went out on the Block Island Bulletin Board, but I'll send out the link to this committee on that. And then Cornneck Road restoration studies moving along. The review committee should have a recommendation to the town council at an upcoming October meeting. And I'm also working with the infrastructure bank on their NIFWIF grant and to potentially hopefully secure additional funding for that project in a future phase. But I'll have more updates in October for you.
Thank you. Glennie, update from you?
Yeah, perfect. So I'll keep it quick. But just so you all know, with the ordinance review, we're hoping to go out to get like a couple more targeted feedback in the next week or two with the hope of, kind of getting some relevant folks in a room to like further discuss, where to go with that. And of course, as a piece of that, we'll hopefully have the opportunity for feedback from you folks with the Coastal Resilience Committee, whether that's by attending a meeting in person or having the opportunity to review and submit that digitally. It's coming down the pipeline. I also just wanted to highlight that there is the Advancing Coastal Resilience Through Nature-Based Solutions webinar that I think was sent out a while ago, has dropped live and is publicly available on NOAA's website, and I'll make sure that gets to you. It is specifically about training programs for practitioners, so you can put your engineer hard hat on and think it's more about, how do we train and focus on folks who are actually building some of these climate infrastructure and nature-based solutions. I did also want to just draw your attention. I'll also share this with the group that the 2024 Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank grants were selected, and Town of New Shoreham wasn't part of that process, but it's still interesting to see who got funding and for what. So that's about 7 out of 8 of them were about stormwater and inland flooding and are specifically focused on culverts. So that's just an interesting thing. And I'll also make sure you can look and see at the projects and see if anything really gets your brain going. And
I just want to correct, sorry, I think I misspoke when I said, did I say the infrastructure bank's grant application to NIFWIF? It's actually Rhode Island DEM, Kim Coriath, the Chief Resiliency Officer, who's I've been in communication with her on it. Sorry, not Rib.
For NIFWIF?
Yes, for the NIFWIF
Yeah.
grant, the state has applied for NIFWIF money for several projects across the state, and Corn Road is one of those listed projects. And NIFWIF did get back to the state saying they were interested, but they had additional questions on projects, so they're working through that review process and potentially will secure funding. So, but I just want to clarify, it wasn't necessarily Rib, but Redondo DEM.
Great, thank you. Kim, I think you also had a.
Thanks. I just wanted to give a little update on Lenny's position, which is been the God, Climate Resiliency Coordinator for Block Island, or in some association of those words. I never seem to get it right. It was, as you all know, basically a 6-month full-time position, as experiment, a pilot that the Nature Conservancy has put together. And it is coming to a close. It has been hugely successful. We're very happy with how it's worked and how it's worked with the community. Glennie has been fantastic. I'm sure you all agree with that. There's a lot, but it's due to end this month, and there's a lot of transition in the town. We have new council, new town manager, new this, new that. So the Nature Conservancy is seeing this right now as taking a pause until those things settle, and then doing some fundraising over the winter to reestablish the position as full-time, hopefully around April. So that's kind of just an update of where we are at this point with the position, and fundraising. Yeah, and if there are specific things that are sort of going on that we have to sort of transition between Glennie and that point, it'll be either Scott, myself, possibly Dee will help with those specific things. And that's how we envision us going forward. And if you have questions, I'm happy to do the best I can to answer them. I have a little cheat sheet here, but I think I've covered everything on very short.
Kim, did Scott or you receive the letter through Judy recommending that Glennie's position be extended?
Judy told me such a letter was coming. I haven't seen it. Scott perhaps has. I don't.
Yeah, I had a look at it and had communicated some of what Kim said to Judy, that TNC is committed to continuing this position. Just need to raise money to continue it, and it seemed like with all the transitions, what as Kim just said. So I don't know if Judy then I'm not quite sure. My vote was that it was a great, I mean, you should submit it as part of your resume when you, because it's all true. I mean, it was all, you've been invaluable, really, really getting us jump started on a lot of projects. So thank you. Thank you.
Judy indicated to me that she was would be sending such a letter in the capacity of backup for, supportive of the person in their file, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, but I haven't seen it yet. So, and I know Judy's went on.
Yeah, and then I don't know what happened after that, I guess.
Judy told me that shortly before she left. So.
Okay.
I saw.
So I'm guessing it.
Read the letter. I read it.
I haven't seen it.
She just checked with me.
I
I approve.
And what I'm saying is obviously
But
hasn't
I
been
don't know if
sent.
she sent it.
Yeah.
Darn.
Oh, it'll be sent eventually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So.
Absolutely.
Anything you want to add to that? I think we covered it. There's some important things that we're trying to get wrapped up, especially some kind of joint presentation for the ordinance review if possible. Timing is becoming an issue. So that's what I know.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Yeah, thank you. Just one quick question. Is your term ending and then it won't start again till April?
The position as a 6-month position is ending, and then there'll be a new position starting in April that will be full-time year round.
And so we're without Glennie from
Yes.
end of November till April.
And you know what else?
Good point.
We can only hope. All right,
Thank you, Kim.
feel free to
Thank
contact
you.
me anytime.
Thank you, Glennie. Yes.
It's funny, I mean, we all agree that we couldn't have landed a better person for the pilot of this sort of relationship and position on the island. It has been truly, the right mix of skills and background and, I can't say enough. So, yeah, so it's been a very positive pilot project. So
Very.
enough that we were going to be fundraising and already have gotten some commitments apparently
Yeah.
to reinstitute this after we get a new town council set and and we know what's happening. We have a good interim town manager. What's happening with planning, planners.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other vacancies that need to get filled out before this person can be totally beneficial to the town.
For me, Glennie's work has only underscored the importance of a resiliency officer of some sort. I think her contribution just added so much to what we've been working on. I think we would be at a loss, or will be at a loss, those 6 months waiting till April. And I'm hoping that Glennie will come back.
That
I
would be
mean,
great. But
yeah.
again, from an outside, stepping back a section, this is a position the town and a part of the planning department that the town needs to have.
Definitely.
And this is great that a nonprofit is willing and able to set in and facilitate it. But the town has a role here too. Town government has a role, town people.
But that's why I was saying it just underscores
Yeah.
that we need a person like that.
Right.
I mean,
On the
that's part
town.
of, part of the real like joys of having this position is that so many people have so many ideas and thoughts and projects and like there's a lot of possibility already. So for me, it's really, my role is like about building capacity
Integration,
for that
right,
has been
right,
building
right.
capacity for that possibility,
Right.
which has made my job a real delight and
Right.
really been really wonderful. But yeah.
Right.
That's great. We've been delighted to have you. When we started this conversation before you came and the job existed, this conversation started because we realized, other towns have this position. It's a paid position with the town. How can we begin to craft that kind of a job description outside of the town so it may be returned to or exist in the town as a position?
And I would just say, that I have my town hat, my citizen hat that says, yes, absolutely. And then when I put on my Nature Conservancy hat, I can, we have at least 4 people in the Rhode Island chapter who are working on community resilience and climate throughout the state. So there is a strong commitment in the Nature Conservancy in Rhode Island to facilitate this throughout its communities. So
But
I
maybe,
think it's a relationship that can be fruitful and go forward for a long time.
so how would you feel about my asking, not now, but my asking Judy to have our group, when we talk to the town council about our budget, that we put some money towards such a person? In your case, you're doing your fundraising, but have part of the town budget go towards that fundraising.
Have at it.
I'll bring that.
May I point out that there was a knucklehead at this year's financial town meeting. He was a guy with a white beard. Wasn't George Davis,
Santa Claus?
who spoke and said, this is actually, that people should be prepared for the fact that we are going to have to invest in this, in a position like Glennie's, like Allison, but it's got to be someone with the kind of expertise that Glennie, or I was thinking, can we recruit this geologist away from CRC, honestly, because it's just it's
time.
overused word. It's existential.
It's time. Thanks, Glennie. We've loved having you. Can't we fund her for January, February, and March?
Sorry.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everyone. I just want to give, Judy had a couple of updates she wanted to share with everyone before I keep you.
She does have.
Judy's so good at getting us out at 4:30. I'm not. So Judy shared, and folks should have received in their email, an article from the Projo and an article from Washington Post. I believe, Laurel printed out the links, correct? I would really take a look, particularly at the Projo one. I know we've identified Galilee and the Point Judith Harbor as being something that we're really concerned about. And there's some really interesting stuff about how much that breakwater has broken down. You can see it when you ride the boat in and out. And it sounded like Jack Reed is currently working with, or had sent a letter to the Army Corps urging them to review it. And so I don't know if we want to somehow incorporate that into our conversations to support that effort. I don't know that it's more of a storm mitigation as opposed to sea level rise, but it's important to protect that harbor for us and the infrastructure there. She also sent around the new US sea level rise website. So I encourage everyone to check that out. Then there's also this HM/FMP informational session. She said, Sosha and Glennie will provide a brief update. Is that something you are prepared to?
That's fine. So basically, as part of the hazard mitigation plan and flood mitigation plan, there's a public outreach component, and very kindly, the public engagement component, or like working group of this committee is working with Kim, who's, who's writing the plan to kind of facilitate that and most effectively accomplish some of her outreach goals. So there is upcoming a public meeting that is going to include a little tour, I think, over near Corneck Road and Bridgegate Square, and then come up here, and Kim's going to make a little presentation about hazard mitigation, and then there's going to be space for public input and
to
hopefully-
encourage people to fill out,
yes.
not fill out, but answer the survey.
Right. Yes, because that's the public survey is going live, or maybe has gone live already. It went live today.
Yeah.
And so that's also a push to get that word out so that folks fill that out. And so there's as much public input as possible so this plan can be as effective as possible. I think that's what I'm supposed to say.
Great, thank you.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes,
About those articles? I would encourage people to look at that link that I sent Judy in our article from the Washington Post. She asked if I could print it today. It's a great article. It's really about the struggle of a town, Texas, a coastal town that's struggling to figure out whether it can rebuild on this dune that's just washing away. But in addition to that, what I really wanted to capture and print for everybody, I just couldn't. I turned it into a PDF, and I couldn't just capture the text because it's so interactive. There are videos planted into the text. Take your time to look at it. I think it's something that we could take inspiration from in writing a similar article or having something like this on our website. Again, I apologize to Judy and all of you. I just couldn't take it from a PDF to just pull out the text and copy it, but it is worth a look.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, to be honest, I haven't read through the whole thing or
Yes.
watched all the videos because I
It's really
can't have the
good.
sound
It's
on
really
often.
good.
I
Yeah.
will. Thank you. And then just last thing, Judy wanted to let everyone know that she had a call with David Prescott, who is the chair of the Charlestown Climate Resilience Committee, about our respective committees and working together. Their main objective is to get the word out to the public, and they are non-political, which sounds a lot like what we're doing, but they also have a revolving capital fund that is dedicated to coastal preservation projects, mostly dredging because it's so expensive. The fund is allowed to accumulate money and interest over time, crossing fiscal years, to be used for large capital expenses. Charlestown Climate Resilience Committee started with $25,000 a year in the Charlestown budget, and they used it to hire a consultant to look at options for Charlestown Beach Road with an eye to climate change. Also have used their funds to support local fire districts with fire danger signage. Their biggest challenge is a dredge project in their community. Anyway, that was an interesting model for these types of committees that I think it's great to find out how other communities are structuring their committees. And he encouraged anyone who's interested to attend their meeting, and he is interested in attending ours. That is all I had from Judy. Upcoming speakers, immersion education sessions. I think November 6th, we're hoping that's going to be a working group meeting, so look for information about that at our next meeting, which is Wednesday, November 6th, 2024. Anything else?
Could you repeat that committee just quickly?
Sorry, it is
The
called the Charlestown Climate Resilience Committee. David Prescott is the chair.
Thanks.
In the interest of expedience, I envision working sessions to follow a regular meeting, but a regular meeting that is shortened. Is that possible?
My understanding was the working group meetings were going to be dividing into those groups, like we talked about at our last meeting, to focus in on specific issues.
And that's fine, but are we allowed not to, is it going to be in lieu of a regular meeting?
Yes, I think so.
And is that allowed?
I think so.
Are we required to meet every month?
You're not required to meet every month. and
Okay,
It's still
then
publicly
forget it.
posted. It's kind of like what you're calling a
Right,
meeting.
right.
I believe it's more about like
Yeah.
the vibe.
That's fine. I was worried that we had to have one.
No, I think we're good.
All right.
Any last call for any anything?
No, just thanks again to Glennie.
Thank you, Glennie. Yes.
It's been great. And I'm gonna do my best to get everything like wrapped up and handed off as like effectively as possible so that, you know,
Thank you.
set you guys up.
We really appreciate it, Glennie, and thank you all for being here. Thank you to our members of the public for attending, and I will make a motion to adjourn. All right, all in favor? Okay.